Sawdust startups. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where it either makes or breaks your business, honestly, when it comes to pricing. And this is probably the most hardest thing to nail down for a new business owner or someone just getting into woodworking, just starting to sell products, especially if you've never sold products before. This is the most confusing thing to most people. This is the most asked question I get in forever. How do you price XYZ? We're going to get into that. So evaluate your costs. You got to know how much you're spending to know how much to sell the product for, because if you don't, you'll wind up undercharging for your product and you won't be profitable. If you're not profitable, you won't stay in business long. All right, so what do we got to know? We got to know what our raw materials are going to cost: wood, screws, glue, etc. A lot of these are fairly fixed costs. Screws, glue, that sort of thing are going to be fixed costs relatively. Things change over time, but they stay pretty much the same on an average time basis, like every 30, 45 days, 90 days. You'll know what those cost. Wood does fluctuate from time to time. Take COVID for an example. During COVID, even construction grade lumber skyrocketed. It was insane. Hardwood didn't fluctuate as much, but it did fluctuate some. So to know, you need to know what your pricing is. What I always did was when I went to purchase lumber, what I would do was take my notes app and I had a running list of what the current price that I was paying for a 10-foot 2x4 or 2x6 or whatever. And I would keep that updated. That way I would know when I quoted a project, I need X number of these per the project, then I could figure out about how much it's going to cost. It's not an exact science, but it gets you there really closely. Also, labor. Your time is worth money, although not every project will be charged labor, and we'll talk about that. If you have employees, of course, you got to figure in their costs, the payroll taxes, everything that goes along with having employees. Startups usually don't, but some of you might, so don't forget about that. Overhead. You need to know how much you're paying in rent and or portion of your house. Basically, if you converted your garage or whatever, that's overhead in a sense. Utilities, especially, like if you're installing mini split, your electricity bill is going to go up a little bit. Different things like that. So month to month, if you don't know what they are month to month, take the annual and average it out. You can do that. Marketing, if you're running ads locally or online, that also is part of your overhead. So we need to know these numbers. And then if you have insurance, like business insurance, anything like that, that's also part of the overhead. And of course, any shipping supplies, office supplies, anything you're using to run the business is also overhead. You may have to average this stuff out over a 12-month period or 3-month period to kind of get an average cost of these things. But it's always a good idea to sit down and take note of what is actually costing you money and help try to figure that into your product costs, because you don't want to wind up undercharging again and just running out of money. All right, so first thing this is one pricing model. There's several we'll go through, but this is one. There's a few ways to determine what your desired profit is or how much you're going to charge. So for this example, this is actually a profit margin pricing, or cost plus, as a lot of people call it. So basically, you're just adding a percentage of profit to the cost of the item. So we take a look right here. This is materials, $30 is what, just an example. $30 in materials, and we're charging $50 an hour in labor. Say it took 1 hour. The overhead for this average time period was $40, and then it's high, but it's just an example. $120 total product cost. So this is how much money you have in the product. You're going to charge 20% of profit. You're wanting to make 20% profit on this one item, which is $30 makes $150. That's called pricing margin, or product pricing. Profit margin pricing. Can't get that right. Cost plus. Competitive pricing model is basically you look at your competitors and what they're charging, and you undercharge under them. That's not really a good model in woodworking, but you look at Amazon, they did it, basically put all the bookstores out of business by selling them cheaper. It's not really a good model here, but it's an option. Market share pricing, you basically lower the price to get an increased number of customers. Think sales. And we use this quite a bit. We'll run a sale 20% off for President's Day, or 20% off for Independence Day, or 25% off Black Friday deal. That is a market share pricing. Basically, you're just running the sale for a limited time to increase orders, and it works well. Value-added pricing, this is where a customer is accepting or paying a higher price based on perceived value. Think about Apple products, Prada or Louis Vuitton, Nike, anything with a name brand, right? They're charging extra because of the name brand. Well, how did they get there? Most of them started out as a brand, a higher end brand. And so you have to think about, if you're just starting out, how do you want to be known? Do you want to be known as a higher end brand? Maybe you don't sell as many products, but you're selling them at a higher price. Think river tables, epoxy river tables. Those command a premium price over a standard, say, farmhouse table. So, and you could sell less of those, but make the same amount of money as you sold, 10 or 15 or 20 farmhouse tables. So you have to kind of think about what type of product you're selling and how to price that, and how you're basically going back into the branding. If you're branding yourself as a higher end brand, then your pricing is going to be a little higher there. Project-based pricing, basically specific bills equal specific costs. I did this a lot. I would say that somebody would quote me or ask me to quote them for an end table. That end table, I already knew how much I had in it because I'd built it before. And so I already know that there's really no basically marking this stuff down where I wanted 20% profit and I knew the overhead. I just give them a set price based on my experience. Bundle pricing, I use this a lot. And I did also when I was selling furniture. I would take, say, a dining table. And if they bought a dining table, a farmhouse dining table, then I would add, or I give them a discount on, say, the benches that go with it or chairs or anything like that. So if you can bundle things together, living room suits. So you sell them a coffee table plus 2 end tables at a slight discount. So you give 20% off what you would normally charge if they order all 3. That way you get more orders, more product, etc. All right, when we talk about pricing, we have to also think about who is your customer, not all customers, your customer, because that's who matters. You have to understand who they are. Demographics, age, location, and income level all play a part in this. Typically, older people, I say older, 30s, 40s, and older, have a little bit more expendable income than younger people. So if you're targeting that audience, then you can usually raise your prices up a little bit. But also location. If you're like us, we're very rural, so the population is small, and then we're also in a lower income level area of the country. So we also had to take that into consideration when we talk about our pricing. And then what's the customer's motivation? Or do they prioritize pricing, or do they prioritize quality more? Or can you meet there in the middle, which is what we try to do. I try to be fair with my pricing, but also try to build good quality products at a decent price. So we kind of meet in the middle on those two. You can go one way or the other. But again, make sure you don't underprice yourself, or you'll underprice yourself out of business. Supply and demand. This is huge. And this is like business 101, supply and demand. Why is the food truck outside the construction sites? You know why. Supply and demand. They have the supply, and the demand is they got hungry workers there. So that's why you see those trucks set up like that. Or if you go to like a concert or anything like that, a lot of times you'll see food trucks parked around because they're going where the customer's at. And we'll talk about that later when we talk about online sales and things like that. Or if you go to craft fairs or anything like that, put yourself in a better position to get the customer, because if you can get in front of the customer, you have a better chance of selling. It's just the way it is. All right. And so supply and demand, also monitor and adjust. When you get a hot selling item or a popular item and it's selling way too good, raise the price. I did this with my stove covers. They were selling like crazy, and I just couldn't keep up with the demand. So what did I do? I raised the prices, and then I raised the prices. I think we started out selling those for like $60 a piece. And by the time we were done, I was selling for $130 a piece. That's how far off my mark I was. So make sure you adjust and overcome to those things. When you start seeing something really moving that you're making, it's probably priced too low. All right, so your competitors also matter in your area. Study your competition. What does your competitor offer? Now, I'm not saying that your best friend down the road who's also woodworking is like an evil competitor, but you have to kind of know how to set yourself apart from people to make those sales. What kind of products are they making? What are their prices? What are the extras they offer? Because a lot of times people do some things extra. Don't mimic your competitors' prices or try to undercut them or anything like that. I'm not telling you to do that. What are their value adds? But you need to be you. Well, your product is your product because you're you, not because you've lowered the price. What you put into your product, your uniqueness, your skill, your time, the way you see things, the way you build things is different from how I would do it or how anybody else would do it, and that matters. What value does your product have over your competition? In other words, does your product solve a problem that your competition is not solving? Are you giving them more premium finishes? Are you using better wood selection, better joinery, etc. So if your competition's building all out of construction grade lumber, can you build it out of more premium hardwoods and then market it that way? Say, well, you don't have to dog or talk bad about your competition. You can just say, I build mine out of high quality premium walnut or maple or poplar or whatever you're using to build your products. You can market it that way. That way people know they're getting a little bit extra. You can also, what I went to add was we offered free delivery within 5 mile radius of my home. That way, because a lot of times I was getting, typically your customers are women if you're building woodworking projects, because on average, women are the majority purchaser of anything that goes in the home. And so I knew that, and a lot of times it was single or older women buying this stuff who didn't have a spouse or whatever. And so we would be able to deliver that product because they didn't have anybody to do it for them, or they didn't have a truck or no way to get it. So offering that free delivery also is a value add. It's a good way to add a little bit of value if you're comfortable doing that and you have transportation to be able to do that. You can also add more customization. That's one thing we started doing when we hit Etsy was people was like, can you put my initial on there? So I bought a Cricut machine, Cricut machine. But now there's lasers out there that are available, CNCs, things like that. You can really add some customization to your product to really level yourself up. And you also want to make your offer stand out above the competition. The superior offer will win the sale, whether that's, again, the premium woods, more customization, deliveries, etc. That's going to help you. All right, so time investment matters. Make sure that you know that your time is valuable. Time is a very limited asset. We only get 24 hours in a day. If you're working a full-time job, 8 to 10, 12 hours a day, you've only got an hour or 2 or 3 a day to literally work on your project, plus balance family and everything else that goes into that. If you get a couple of days off, maybe you get one of those. So understand that your time is so limited that it's worth the price that you're paying, or that people are paying for it. Also, do not forget about the development time on each product. I know a lot of times we would back and forth on sketches and sizes and things like that. That stuff matters. And so make sure you're keeping up with how much time you're investing in this stuff. Also, there is the sourcing of products. So if you're having to drive to, 20, 30 miles to go get hardwood lumber, time to pick that stuff out, make sure you're getting good quality selection. All of that should be figured into the price of your product, because all that time that you spent going to source that product is time you're not working on actual products or projects for other people. So make sure you keep that in mind. The knowledge that your products took a long time to produce can also add or justify to the markup. So if you say river tables or anything that takes you multiple days or weeks to build is a premium, because your time is valuable. And if you're spending an exorbitant amount of time on one product or one project because of an extra customization, all that stuff adds up, and it's a markup and a premium on your product. Now, how do you price your first product? I think this is where most people are kind of get hung up. They're like, what am I doing? How do I price this? So I'm using the cutting board for an example. What I'm going to do is, we're going to use the profit margin pricing example. We're going to use maple and walnut in this product, or in this cutting board. We're going to build a cutting board. It's going to be 18 inches long, 12 inches wide. This is just random numbers. I didn't pull this from anywhere. $30 in maple. We got $40 in walnut. We know that. How much is your labor or time worth? Again, remember, I got it bolded for a reason we'll talk about. Your overhead costs, maybe it's bits and things like that you're doling up over time. It's like an average cost of all the product that you're using up, consumable type stuff, as well as electricity and the rent and all this stuff. So we got a total of $150 that we think is in this board. So we want a profit margin of 40%. This is a good profit margin, actually. If you get 30%, 20%, it's really kind of low on especially lower ticket items. Higher ticket items is different when you're making a lot of money, several $1,000s. It's a little bit different, because if you add 40% to $2,000, it's going to be a whole lot more than 40% to $150. But I like this profit on a $150 cutting board. We're going to add $60 for our profit. We're going to get $210 for that cutting board, which is a very fair price for a very premium, high quality cutting board. All right, and back to the reason that labor was bolded was because of that project pricing I talked about. I really didn't like doing hourly wages, because, again, if you wind up with a product that takes you, you've streamlined it, right? The first time you build it, it takes you 8 hours to make it. The second time you build it, it takes you 6 hours to make it because you've developed a few processes and you understand how it's all going to go together. Well, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth time you build it, you might can streamline that down to 2 hours, especially if you have jigs available and you really understand. Like you basically get into production mode, which is what I did with the stove covers. I was able to set up jigs and processes so that I streamlined those so I could literally knock one out in less than an hour. Where the first time I built one probably took me 5 or 6 hours to make. So if you do hourly based pricing, what you're going to wind up with is you charge an hourly rate here and you only had 8 hours in it. You're keeping up with your time, you had 8 hours. We charge $50 an hour. Well, then down here, 2 months later, you're building the same product and you got 3 hours in it. You've just lost money. You got to put that somewhere else. And because you've developed this skill and these processes, that's worth money. It's not just because you spent hours on it the first time and then 3 hours on it the last time. The fact that you've learned this skill and you've learned this knowledge is valuable. I mean, it just is. And so you should be charging for it. So don't always think that, oh, I got to charge $50 an hour and it only took me 2 hours. Well, how many times have you built this product and you've developed these processes? So keep that in mind when you're talking about your pricing. On commission sales, I've got a few rules here. In other words, you're taking orders, which is what we wind up doing after everything started moving. People say, can you build me a table? We'd work out a deal. I'd give them a price. Always, always, always make them pay a deposit. I don't care if they're your best friend from high school for 20 years. If they're your friend, they won't have a problem, and y'all have agreed to basically exchange goods for money or services for money, then you shouldn't have a problem, or they shouldn't have a problem paying you up front. They just shouldn't. Now, I run into this myself. I built a flag for a person who was supposedly an acquaintance / not really coworker. We were both police officers. We just worked for different departments. He ordered a flag that he wanted. It was a custom flag. I had never made one like it before. I built the flag, and I didn't take a deposit. And when it come time for delivery, he was working an accident that my daughter was involved in. She wasn't at fault. She literally got run over in a crosswalk, and she's fine. But because he did that, he said that he couldn't buy my product now because it was a conflict of interest. And I was like, has nothing to do with anything. We made this deal way before anything happened. Refused to buy it. So I was stuck with this custom flag that I couldn't sell. So I wound up just throwing it on my Etsy store, and it sat there for weeks and weeks and weeks. Finally, it sold for the same price I would have gotten from him, but I had to pay shipping. Plus, I had to keep it around for a while. It was just a mess. So I learned my lesson. Rule number 1, require a deposit. Doesn't matter who it is. I always took 50% down. You do whatever you're comfortable with. 50% covers my material, and it covers some of my time that I'm going to invest in this. Rule number 2, get the product description in writing. So if somebody gives you an order or they're trying to get you a commission piece, make sure that quote is in writing. I don't care if it's on a messenger app or a text message or an email. However you need to keep track of that, you can write it in, like, say, our Woodworkers Chronicle has places where you can literally give quotes and stuff to it. You can, what I would do is if I use this to basically, right there where the payment ledger is, what I would do is just have them initial that. Whatever the description of the product is, you can put it over in the notes part and have the customer initial that. That way, you know that they're locked into this design, this color scheme, this material type. Like, everybody's understanding what's going on here, because the last thing you want to do is build the product and show up and they say, well, I wanted a walnut top, not maple. Like, no, we have it right here in writing that you wanted the maple top. Now you just don't like the color of it, basically. And so that way, if anything happens, then you're covered on your end. Again, get confirmation from the customer that they agree with the design before you build. So just double check. It's just easy. I mean, it's not that, it sounds more difficult than this. Okay, let me read this back to you so that that I understand exactly what you want, so that I make your perfect table for you. You want a table that is 6 foot long by 2.5 feet wide. You want it to be 30 inches tall, and you want it out of walnut. You want the top out of walnut and the base out of maple. Is this correct? Yes. Okay. Do you want the tulip legs on it? Like, whatever customization or whatever's going on, literally detail that out and just double check with them. And then, yep, you get the confirmation. You're off to the race. You can build stuff. And then rule number 4, don't forget to collect the remaining balance upon delivery, because you're excited to deliver and you're worried about, is the customer going to like it? That kind of stuff. So just make sure to get your money. I hope that helps you price your products. Honestly, the best thing you can do is to sit down and figure out about how much it's going to cost you to build it. How much time is it going to take you to build it? And can you streamline that process over time if you plan on selling multiples of those? And try to be fair. I always try to be fair with my pricing. It didn't really matter if it was an end table or if it was a stove cover or if it was a dining table. I just wanted to make a profit and be fair. That's always been my model. Same thing we do now. Any of the products we sell on our website or any of the products we sell on Faith Valley Tools, we just want to be fair with our pricing and provide a good product. And really, that's really all you can do. I don't want to gouge people. You're not trying to make all your money off of one person. You're not trying to, retire on that one order. Just be fair. And another thing, be cautious of, well, we'll talk cautious businesses trying to take advantage of you later. But for pricing, just be fair.